The cold was a living thing, a predator slinking through the pines of the Bloodwood Valley. It coiled around my arms and seeped into my leather armor, carrying the scent of frost and wet earth. Above, the Moon Mother hung like a shard of bone in an ink-black sky, her light unforgiving, exposing every tremor of fear, every glint of sharpened steel. Tonight, the valley floor would drink its fill of blood. My blood, if necessary. The thought was a prayer, a promise I had whispered into the mane of my wolf every night for a month. Loyalty was the marrow in our bones, the song in our hearts. Tonight, we would sing it until our voices broke. A low growl rumbled through the Silverwood pack, a wave of restless energy that vibrated up through the soles of my boots. We stood poised on the ridge, a wall of gray fur, grim faces, and gleaming claws. My father, Alpha Corvin, stood at the forefront, his great silver mane catching the moonlight, his presence a fortress against the coming storm. But even his strength could not completely erase the chill that had nothing to do with the wind. The silence from the opposing ridge was wrong. It was too deep, too confident. It was the silence of a predator that knows the hunt is already over. And then the war horns of the Black Fang pack finally sounded. A single guttural blast that tore through the night and seemed to shake the very stars from their hold. The night war began. I swore I would die for my pack. I am Pelira Thalis, daughter of the Eastern Line, raised to believe that bond was the only thing that mattered. As our answering horns roared, I gripped the leather-wrapped hilt of my blade, my own inner wolf pacing the cage of my ribs, hungry for the fight. I stood with my kin, ready to meet the enemy, ready to fight until my last breath painted the snow-covered ground red. But then I saw her. Across the valley, through the swirling mist that clung to the frozen earth, the Black Fang ranks parted. They moved with a chilling reverence, creating an aisle for their alpha. And he emerged, a figure carved from shadow and fury. Norik Talvarin. His name was a curse on our tongues, a whisper of endings. He was larger than any wolf shifter I had ever seen, his shoulders a bulwark against the world, his face a roadmap of old scars. He moved with a grace that was terrifying in a man his size, each step a declaration of power. But my eyes were not on him, not entirely. They were drawn to the slender figure at his side, half hidden in his shadow. A flash of pale hair, the color of spun moonlight, so achingly familiar it stole the breath from my lungs. My blade felt suddenly heavy, my blood turning to ice water in my veins. The world seemed to slow, the roar of the pack fading to a distant hum. It couldn't be. My sister, Cassandra Corvelin, the girl who once shared my bed of furs, my secrets, my very blood. She was not among us. She was not a prisoner bound in chains or a captive dragged onto the field for a show of dominance. She stood across the field, her small hand resting on the enemy alpha's forearm, her body pressed to his side as if seeking shelter from a storm he himself had created. And on the pale, perfect skin of her neck, just below her ear, a mark burned with an unholy light. It pulsed, a swirling brand of midnight black and angry crimson, a fresh claim that seemed to steam in the frigid air. The Alpha's mark. Norik Talvarin's mark. He had not taken her captive. He had not stolen her. He had claimed her. A collective gasp ripped through the Silverwood pack. It was a sound of 100 hearts breaking at once, 100 loyalties shattering like glass. My own heart did not break. It split. It tore down the middle, a raw, ragged wound that left me hollowed out, gasping for air that wouldn't come. How can we fight the enemy when my own sister now bears his bond? My own blood, my other half, willingly bound to the monster sworn to destroy us. My father made a sound, a strangled noise deep in his chest, a mix of disbelief and pure, undiluted rage. His gaze, which had been locked on his rival, now fixed on his youngest daughter. The fortress of his face began to crumble, cracks of agony showing through the stone. The battlefield waited for blood, the Moon Mother waited for loyalty, and Cassandra had made her choice. I could feel the eyes of my pack turning from her to me. They saw the same silver hair, the same shape of the eyes, the same bloodline. In that moment, her betrayal became my shame. Her treason was a stain that spattered across my own honor. Whispers started, insidious as smoke, slithering through the ranks. A traitor's sister. The whole bloodline is tainted. How could the Alpha not have known? My wolf clawed at my insides, not with battle lust, but with a desperate, wounded agony. It whined, a sound of utter confusion, smelling the scent of its kin. Its sister wolf mingled with the foul stench of the enemy. The scent of Norik Talvarin was like ozone after a lightning strike, cold stone from a deep cave, and the metallic tang of old blood. It was the scent of death, and it was all over her. Across the impossible distance, Gissandra's eyes met mine. For a heartbeat, the world fell away. There was no army, no war, only the two of us, connected by a thread of memory that was now being violently severed. I searched her face for an explanation, for a sign of coercion, of fear, of regret. I saw nothing. Her expression was a pale, frozen mask. Her eyes, once so full of light and laughter, were as empty and cold as the winter moon. She looked right through me, as if I were a ghost, a memory she had already discarded. That look hurt more than any blade ever could. It was a final, silent twist of the knife. Norik Talvarin slowly raised a hand, not to signal an attack, but to gently trace the edge of the mark on Gissandra's neck. It was a gesture of ownership, of absolute possession, and he did it while staring directly at my father. A silent declaration. This is mine. Your blood, your daughter, your future. It all belongs to me now. The last thread of control in my father snapped. Alpha Corvin threw his head back and let out a roar that was pure, unadulterated pain. It was the sound of a king watching his kingdom burn, of a father losing his child, not to death, but to something far worse. It echoed across the valley, a challenge born of heartbreak. But he didn't order the charge. The horns remained silent. The warriors remained frozen, their rage now poisoned by confusion and suspicion. To attack Norik now was to attack Gissandra's chosen mate. By wolf law, by the sacred law of the bond, she was now part of his pack. To harm her mate would be to harm her. My father, our Alpha, was trapped. His hands, which had been ready to command an army, now trembled at his sides. The silence stretched, thin and brittle. The Black Fang pack watched, their expressions a mixture of pity and contemptuous victory. They had won the war before the first drop of blood was ever spilled. They had struck at the heart of our pack, at the Alpha's own bloodline, and broken us from the inside out. My mind reeled, trying to grasp the enormity of it. Gisandra, who cried when a baby bird fell from its nest. Gisandra, who would sneak me honey cakes when she thought no one was looking. Gisandra, who had sworn on the moon with me that we would always, always protect our family. How? When? Why? The questions hammered against the inside of my skull, but there were no answers, only the sight of her standing beside our greatest enemy. My father's head slowly turned, his eyes, burning with a cold, terrible fire, finding me in the ranks. The weight of his gaze was immense, a physical pressure that made me want to drop to my knees. The pack parted around me, leaving me exposed, isolated. He saw his other daughter, the loyal one, the one who had not betrayed him. In his eyes, I saw a desperate, horrific glimmer of a solution, a way to reclaim his honor, to answer this unspeakable insult. His voice, when it came, was not a roar, but a low, gravelly command that cut through the frozen air with the sharpness of obsidian. Pallyra! He raised a single trembling finger, and he did not point it at Norik Talvarin. He pointed it across the field, directly at the sister who had shattered my world. Bring me the traitor. The words echoed in the dead air, stripped of all warmth, all fatherly affection. Bring me the traitor. They were not a plea. They were a sentence. For my sister, a sentence of punishment. For me, a sentence of torment. The world narrowed to a single, impossible path across the snow-covered valley, a path that ended with my hands on my own kin. The whispers in the ranks died. replaced by a suffocating, expectant silence. Every warrior in my pack, every monster on the opposing ridge, turned their eyes to me. They were waiting to see what the traitor's sister would do. My feet felt rooted to the frozen earth, tangled in 1,000 threads of memory. Gisandra laughing as we tumbled in the snow, her small hand clutching mine as we crept through the woods after dark. The soft sound of her breathing as she slept beside me. To move against her would be to move against myself, to tear out a part of my own soul. My wolf, the fierce, loyal beast that had always surged forward at my father's command, was now a cowering thing in the back of my mind. It whined, a low, miserable sound of protest, refusing to see the pack sister across the field as an enemy. It saw only family. It smelled only betrayal, but the source was a tangled knot it could not unravel. My hand trembled on the hilt of my blade. I could feel my father's gaze burning into my back, a physical weight of command and demand. He had chosen me as his instrument of justice, his way of cauterizing this wound in front of both packs. To hesitate was to show weakness. To refuse was to commit treason myself. The pack's loyalty was already fractured. My disobedience would shatter it completely. Slowly, as if moving through deep water, I forced my right foot to lift. The crunch of my boot on the snow was obscenely loud in the stillness. I took one step, then another. I was not walking toward my sister. I was walking into a nightmare. With each step, the mark on her neck seemed to pulse brighter, a malevolent heart beating with foreign blood. The scent of Noric Talvarin grew stronger, a miasma of ancient power and cold dominance that choked the air. It clung to Gisandra, overriding the familiar scent of lavender and winter berries that had been hers since birth. Across the field, the Black Fang ranks bristled. Low growls rumbled from their chests, a warning tide of sound. They shifted, closing ranks not around their alpha, but protectively around her. They had accepted her. In their eyes, she was one of them now. She was theirs to defend. Noric Talvarin did not move. He stood like a monolith of granite, his scarred face impassive. But as I drew closer, his gaze shifted from my father, landing on me for the first time. His eyes were not the fiery red of a raging wolf, but the color of storm clouds. A deep, turbulent gray that held unnerving intelligence. There was no heat in his look, no anger. It was something colder, more calculating. He assessed me, taking in my stance. The sword in my hand, the agony I knew must be written all over my face. For a fleeting, terrifying moment, I saw a flicker of something in those depths. Not pity, but a kind of grim understanding. It was as if he had expected this, as if he knew the pieces on the board better than we did. He shifted his weight, a subtle movement, but it placed him more squarely in front of Gisandra. A silent shield, a clear message: you will not touch her. I was halfway across the no man's land when Gisandra finally moved. She lifted her head and her empty eyes focused on me. Her lips parted and she mouthed a single word. I couldn't hear it, but I could read the shape of it on her lips. No, was it a plea? A warning? A command? Her expression remained a frozen mask, giving nothing away. But the word, silent as it was, struck me like a physical blow. It stopped me dead in my tracks. The last 10 yards between us might as well have been a chasm a mile wide. My resolve, already paper-thin, disintegrated. My wolf howled in relief inside my chest, its own loyalty to its littermate overriding the alpha's command. I could not do it. I could not be the one to drag my sister back in chains, to hand her over to a fate I couldn't bear to imagine. The silence on the ridge behind me broke. A murmur of disgust, of disappointment, rippled through the Silverwood warriors. My hesitation was a public disgrace. My failure was my father's failure. I had shamed him. I had shamed us all. My father's roar of fury was the sound of the world ending. It was not a call to battle, but a cry of pure frustration. He had lost. He had lost his daughter. He had lost the loyalty of his pack. And now his other daughter had defied him on the field of war. He made a sharp, cutting gesture with his hand, the signal for retreat. The war horns blew again, but this time, it was a mournful, defeated sound. The Silverwood pack turned, their movements heavy with shame and anger. They did not look at me as they passed. They gave me a wide berth, as if I carried a plague. I was no longer Palira Thalis, warrior of the Silverwood. I was the traitor's sister, who had frozen in the face of the enemy. I stood alone in the center of the valley for a long moment, caught between two armies, belonging to neither. Finally, I turned and forced my legs to carry me back to the ridge, back to the cold judgment of my pack. I did not look back at Cassandra. I couldn't bear to see her one last time, standing beside the monster who had stolen her from us. The march back to the Silverwood encampment was a funeral procession. The usual posturing and battle-ready adrenaline were gone, replaced by a heavy, oppressive gloom. The air was thick with unspoken accusations and the bitter scent of humiliation. Every time I accidentally met someone's gaze, they would look away, their faces hard with contempt. My friends, the warriors I had trained with since we were pups, now looked at me as if I were a stranger, a dangerous stranger. When we reached the relative safety of our camp, the pack dispersed into tense, whispering groups. No one spoke to me, no one came near me. I was an island of shame in a sea of resentment. My father strode directly to his command tent without a single word, his back as rigid and unforgiving as a spear shaft. I knew I would be summoned. The wait was its own form of torture. I stood by the dying embers of a communal fire, trying to warm hands that had gone numb, but the cold was inside me. It was a block of ice in my chest where my heart used to be. Eventually, one of my father's betas, a hard-faced male named Kyle, approached me. His expression was devoid of any warmth. "The Alpha will see you, Kaka," he grunted, his tone making it clear he was delivering a summons to a prisoner, not a fellow warrior. I followed him to the Alpha's tent. The hide flaps pulled tightly shut against the night. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of pine incense and my father's barely contained rage. He stood over a large wooden table, his back to me, his massive hands braced on the map of the valley that was now testament to our failure. For a long time, he said nothing. The silence was a weapon, designed to break me down, to make me feel the full weight of my insubordination. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously soft, a low rumble that promised violence more than any shout could. "You shamed me," he said, still not turning around. "You shamed this pack. You stood on a battlefield and chose the life of a traitor over the command of your Alpha." "She is my sister," I whispered, my voice raw. He finally turned, and the look in his eyes made me flinch. The loving father I had known my entire life was gone, replaced by the cold, ruthless Alpha. "She is a Black Fang now," he snarled. "She bears the mark of our enemy. She is nothing to us, and your sentiment, your weakness, is a poison we cannot afford." He took a step toward me, his shadow falling over me like a shroud. "I gave you an order, Palira. Your duty was to obey. Your love for your sister is a liability. Your loyalty is now in question." "My loyalty is to Silverwood," I protested, my voice gaining a sliver of strength. "It always has been." "Then you should have dragged her across that field by her hair," he roared, his control finally snapping. The tent seemed to shrink around his fury. "You should have shown our enemies and our own warriors that there is no room for traitors in this pack, no matter whose blood they share. Instead, you stood there like a stone, and you showed them all our weakness. You showed them my weakness." He paced the confines of the tent, his rage a caged animal. "They think my bloodline is tainted. They think our pack is broken from within. And you confirmed it for them." He stopped and looked at me, his eyes filled with a chilling finality. "I cannot have a warrior in my ranks whose heart is divided. I cannot have the traitor's sister leading any charge. Her loyalty's forever suspect." My own anger began to rise, a desperate, defensive flame. "What would you have me do, kill her?" "I would have you do your duty," he shot back. He strode to the tent flap, throwing it open and pointing out into the cold, hostile camp. They are watching. They are waiting to see what I will do with the second daughter who has failed me. I cannot show mercy. I cannot show sentiment. I must show strength. He dropped the flap and turned back to me, his face a mask of cold resolve. You are a warrior no more. Your weapons will be taken. Your rank is stripped. You are confined to the healer's den until I decide what is to be done with you. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You are no longer a shield for this pack. You are a wound, and wounds must be contained before they fester. The healer's den was less a place of comfort and more a cage of shame. It smelled of dried herbs, poultices, and the cloying scent of sickness, a stark contrast to the crisp, clean air of the training grounds I was now forbidden to enter. My blades had been taken, my leather armor replaced with a simple woolen tunic, the symbol of a warrior stripped from me as easily as shedding a skin. I was confined, ostracized, my presence a constant, silent reminder of the pack's humiliation. The healers treated me with a distant, clinical courtesy, their hands tending to the few scrapes I'd earned before the battle that never was, but their eyes were cold. They saw the traitor's sister, the alpha's failure. Days bled into a gray, monotonous misery. I spent my time grinding herbs with a stone pestle, my mind grinding over the same impossible images. Gissandra's blank eyes, the pulsing darkness of the mark on her neck. My father's face contorted in a mask of rage. Sleep offered no escape, only nightmares where I was chasing Gisandra through a forest of thorns, her laughter echoing just out of reach as the shadow of Norik Talvarin loomed over us both. The pack's mood was a festering wound. The failed confrontation had left us in a state of tense, simmering paralysis. The Black Fangs had not attacked, but their presence was a constant pressure on our borders. Scouts reported they were fortifying their position, their confidence growing with each passing day of our inaction. My father grew more withdrawn, more volatile. His roars of frustration would sometimes echo through the camp from his command tent, a sound that made everyone flinch. He had not summoned me again. I was a ghost, a problem he had locked away, hoping it would simply disappear. One evening, as the moon climbed high and full, casting a stark, silver light over the camp, the restlessness in my blood became unbearable. My wolf, silent and sullen since that night, began to pace the confines of my soul. It yearned for the hunt, for the freedom of the forest, for the feel of wind in its fur. Confined in this tent, in this diminished human form, we were both suffocating. Ignoring the healer's warnings to remain inside, I slipped out of the tent. The camp was quiet, most warriors trying to find rest in their furs, but the air was still thick with tension. Sentries stood like statues on the perimeter, their senses straining against the oppressive silence of the woods. I avoided the main paths, keeping to the shadows, my bare feet making no sound on the cold, packed earth. My destination was the low stone wall at the edge of the encampment, a place where Gisandra and I used to sit and watch the stars, whispering secrets into the night. The wind was sharp, carrying the scent of pine and the distant metallic smell of the Black Fang's campfires. It was a scent that made my wolf's hackles rise. I drew my thin cloak tighter, my gaze sweeping across the dark expanse of the valley. From here, I could just make out the flicker of their fires on the opposite ridge, a constellation of enemy stars. And somewhere among them was my sister. Was she safe? Was she happy? Did she ever think of me? Of us, the questions were a familiar torment. To believe she had gone willingly was to accept that our entire life together had been a lie. To believe she had been forced was to imagine horrors I could not bear. A twig snapped behind me. I spun around, my body instantly dropping into a defensive crouch, my hands instinctively reaching for blades that were no longer there. My heart hammered against my ribs. A figure detached itself from the deeper shadows of the pine trees, moving with a silence and grace that was utterly unnerving. It was too large to be one of my pack. My breath caught in my throat. It was him. Norik Talvarin stood less than 20 feet away, a living piece of the night. He was not dressed for war, but in simple dark leathers, unarmed, yet he carried an aura of power that was more intimidating than any weapon. The moonlight caught the silver streaks in his dark hair and traced the lines of the scars on his face, making him look like some ancient, battle-worn deity. He did not look surprised to see me. He looked like he had been waiting. My first instinct was to scream, to call the sentries, but my voice was frozen in my throat. My wolf, instead of snarling in aggression, went utterly still, every muscle tensed, its senses overwhelmed. His scent rolled off him in waves, the storm, the stone, the old blood. It was a scent of absolute, unquestionable authority. It wasn't the frenzied rage of my father. It was the calm, deep power of a mountain that knew it could not be moved. "You are far from your pack's fire, little wolf," he said. His voice was a low rumble, like rocks grinding together deep beneath the earth. It held no overt threat, yet every syllable vibrated with dormant power. "What are you doing here?" I finally managed to rasp, forcing myself to stand taller, to not show the fear that was turning my bones to water. "Have you come to finish what you started?" A faint, humorless smile touched his lips, a slight upward curve that did not reach his storm-gray eyes. "If I had wanted to finish this, your camp would be ash, and your father's pelt would be on my floor." The raw arrogance of the statement should have enraged me, but it was stated with such calm certainty that it simply sounded like a fact. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, and I flinched back. He stopped instantly, holding up a hand, palm open, a gesture of peace that seemed utterly at odds with the man himself. "I did not come to fight," he said, his voice softer now, but no less resonant. "I came to speak with you." "We have nothing to speak about," I spat, my fear beginning to curdle into anger. "You have my sister. You marked her. You turned her against her own blood." He watched me for a long moment, his gaze intense, analytical. "Is that what you believe?" he asked. "That I stole her? That I bewitched her? Your pack sees a simple story of villainy and betrayal. I thought perhaps the traitor's sister might see a more complicated truth." The way he said traitor's sister, without malice, but with a kind of pointed irony, pricked at my pride. He was goading me, testing me. "She would never have chosen you," I insisted, the words feeling hollow even as I said them. "Not over her family, not over us. She chose to survive," he countered, his voice dropping again, drawing me in despite myself. "Your father was leading your pack into a war you could not win. A war for territory, for pride. A war that would have seen you all slaughtered." He took another slow step. "I offered her a way to save you, to save everyone." My mind reeled. "What are you talking about? A way to save us? By joining you?" "An alliance," he clarified. "A binding of the two packs, the Silverwood's speed and knowledge of these forests, bound to the Black Fang's strength and numbers. Together, we would be untouchable. The bond between an alpha and his mate is the strongest alliance there is, a permanent treaty sealed in blood and magic. I offered this to your father. He refused. He saw it as surrender." I stared at him, my disbelief warring with a sliver of desperate hope. Could it be true? My father was a proud man. He would see such an offer as an insult, an admission of weakness, but to plunge us into a suicidal war instead? "And Cassandra," I whispered, "she agreed to this? To be a political pawn? A sacrifice?" "She was not a sacrifice," Norik said. And for the first time, a flicker of genuine emotion crossed his face, a dark, protective fire in his eyes. "She saw the wisdom in it. She saw a path that did not end with her family's blood watering the roots of these trees. She made a choice, a difficult one. She chose peace, even if it meant being seen as a traitor by the very people she was trying to protect." The world tilted on its axis. The neat, simple story of my sister's betrayal was cracking, revealing something far more complex and painful beneath. Cassandra, the gentle, timid one, making a decision of such magnitude, sacrificing her own happiness, her own name, for our survival. "If this is true," I said, my voice trembling, "why did you not say this on the field? Why the silent display of power? Why humiliate my father? Your father would not have listened to words, Norik stated flatly. He understands only shows of strength. I showed him a strength he could not fight, a bond. I took the battle off the field and moved it into his heart, his bloodline. I knew it would halt the war, and it did. He paused, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly. It was Gissandra's idea. She knew it was the only way to make him stop without bloodshed. She bore the cost of that decision, the cost of your pack's hatred. I felt the air leave my lungs in a rush. The stone wall behind me was the only thing holding me up. Gisandra had orchestrated this. She had chosen this path, this exile, this mark, to save us. And we had called her a traitor for it. I had been ordered to drag her back in shame. I don't believe you, I stammered. But the protest was weak. The truth of his words resonated in the hollow space in my chest. It explained her empty eyes, her silent plea of no. She wasn't warning me away from her. She was warning me not to interfere, not to ruin the fragile, terrible peace she had bought with her own reputation. Norik seemed to sense my crumbling defenses. He moved closer, closing the distance between us until he was only an arm's length away. His sheer presence was overwhelming. I could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the scent of pine and cold night on his leathers. She is not your enemy, Palira, he said, his voice a low, intimate murmur that slid under my skin. And neither am I, but your father's pride is. He will not let this rest. He will look for a way to break the bond, to rescue her, and in doing so, he will start the war anew, a war that Gisandra sacrificed everything to prevent. He reached out, not to touch me, but to gesture back towards my own camp. They whisper about you, they shun you, they see you as tainted. Here, you are a prisoner of your own blood. Your loyalty is your cage. His eyes held mine, and the world seemed to shrink to the space between us. Gisandra misses you. She worries about you. She asked me to come. Why? The word was barely a breath. She wants you to understand, he said, and she wants you to be safe. He finally let his hand drop to his side. Your father will not let your defiance go unpunished forever. He will make an example of you. You are a loose thread in his narrative of betrayal. He will cut you. The wind sighed through the pines, a mournful sound. The truth of his words settled in my bones with a chilling weight. My father, in his grief and rage, was capable of anything. He had already disowned me in all but name. What came next? What do you want from me? I asked, my voice shaking. Norik's expression was unreadable, a landscape of shadows and moonlight. I want nothing. Gisandra, however, wants her sister. She wants you to have a choice. Not one made of duty and honor, but a real one. He paused, letting the weight of his final words hang in the frozen air between us. A choice to leave this pack that has turned on you, and come with me. The offer hung in the air between us. A shocking, impossible bridge across a chasm of hatred and war. Come with me. The words were a poison and a lifeline, a betrayal and a salvation. To accept would be to sever the final, frayed thread, connecting me to my home, my past, my very identity. It would mean turning my back on my father and embracing the monster from my nightmares. But to refuse was to remain here, a pariah in my own pack, waiting for my father's cold justice to fall. It was to accept the cage of shame he had built for me. My mind was a whirlwind of his word or her words, tearing down the simple truths I had clung to. Gisandra, not a traitor, but a martyr. Norik, not a conqueror, but a diplomat using the only language my father understood. And me, caught in the middle, a pawn in a game whose rules I was only just beginning to comprehend. My wolf, which had been cowed and silent for days, stirred with a conflicted energy. It recognized the raw power in the alpha before me, a power that dwarfed my father's angry pride. It was the power of a storm, immense and ancient, and it felt less like a threat and more like an unassailable fact of nature. It was terrifying, but it was also compelling. Why? I managed to choke out, the word feeling small and inadequate. Why would you offer me this? I am the daughter of your enemy, the sister of your mate, yes, but still a Silverwood wolf. I would be a spy in your midst, a weakness. Norritt's gaze did not waver. You are no longer a Silverwood wolf in their eyes, he stated, his voice devoid of pity, just cold observation. You are a loose end, a reminder of your father's humiliation. To him, you are a political problem. To Cassandra, you are her sister. And to me, he paused, his stormy eyes searching my face, as if looking for something he wasn't sure he would find. To me, you are the one who hesitated. You stood on a battlefield, with your alpha's command ringing in your ears, and you chose family. That kind of loyalty is rare. It is a strength, not a weakness. My pack is built on strength, not blind obedience. His words struck a chord deep inside me, a place that had been aching with shame since that night. He had not seen my hesitation as failure. He had seen it as a choice. He had seen the one thing no one in my own pack had been willing to see, the heart behind the action. A small, fragile part of me that I thought had been crushed began to unfurl. And if I refuse? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Then I will leave, he said simply. And you will face what comes next on your own. But know this, your father will not stop. He is already seeking counsel from the old weavers, trying to find a way to sever a true mate bond. Such magic is dark, forbidden. It requires a terrible price, a price Cassandra might have to pay. The blood drained from my face. The old weavers were hedge witches, shifters who had abandoned pack law for blood magic and twisted rituals. For my father to even consider consulting them showed the depths of his obsession, his willingness to risk not just war, but my sister's very soul to reclaim his honor. Cassandra had sacrificed herself to prevent a war of blades, only to be threatened by a war of dark magic. The choice was no longer just about me. It was about her. If I stayed, I was powerless, locked away. If I left, if I went with him, perhaps I could be near her, protect her, understand the full scope of what she had done. Perhaps I could be a shield for her in the heart of the enemy camp, a role I had failed to fulfill on the battlefield. The sound of a sentry's horn, a short, sharp blast from the eastern perimeter, shattered the charged silence. A patrol was returning. My time was up. You have to go, I hissed, my eyes darting toward the sounds of movement in the camp. Norik did not seem concerned. He merely inclined his head. The choice is yours, Palera. The next full moon is in 3 nights. If you choose to leave, meet me at the old standing stones on the northern ridge at moonrise. If you are not there, I will know your answer. Without another word, he turned and melted back into the shadows as silently as he had appeared. He was a ghost, a phantom, leaving me with the world-altering weight of his proposition. I stumbled back to the healer's den, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, my mind a chaotic storm. The scent of him, ozone and cold stone, clung to me, an invisible brand that I was sure everyone in the camp could smell. The next 2 days were a blur of quiet agony. Every interaction was filtered through the lens of my secret. When a healer gave me a bowl of thin stew, her eyes filled with pity, I wondered if she would still pity me if she knew I had stood willingly in the presence of the enemy Alpha. When I heard my father's angry voice barking orders, I no longer heard the righteous fury of a betrayed leader, but the desperate pride of a man willing to sacrifice his own daughter to forbidden magic. I tried to convince myself that Norik was lying, that this was all an elaborate trick to sow more chaos, but the pieces fit too well. Cassandra's cold resolve, my father's escalating rage, the pack's deepening despair, it all pointed to the terrible truth he had laid bare. The night before the full moon, my father finally summoned me. Kael, his beta, collected me from the den with his usual grim silence. This time, he led me not to the command tent, but to the Alpha's private quarters. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of sleepless nights and stale wine. My father sat on a fur-draped chair, looking older and more worn than I had ever seen him. The fire in his eyes had been banked, leaving behind dull, gray embers of exhaustion. "Pallyra," he said, his voice rough. He gestured to a stool opposite him. I sat, my back ramrod straight, my hands clenched in my lap. "The pack is restless," he began, staring into the low flames of the hearth. "They see your presence here as a sign of my weakness. They believe the traitor's blood still has a hold on my heart." I remained silent, my own heart a cold stone in my chest. "I have consulted with others," he continued, his gaze still fixed on the fire. He couldn't look at me. "There may be a way to undo this, a way to cleanse Cassandra of his mark, to bring her home." He was admitting it. He was confirming Norik's words. He was truly planning on using dark magic. "And what is the price for this cleansing?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were haunted. "The price is blood, a sacrifice of a near kin, a life willingly given to sever a bond of life." His meaning was unmistakable. To save one daughter, he would have to sacrifice another. He would have to sacrifice me. My breath hitched. He wasn't going to execute me for defiance. He was going to use me as a ritual component. "You cannot," I whispered, horrified. "That is forbidden. The Moon Mother would curse us all." "The Moon Mother has already abandoned us," he roared, slamming his fist on the arm of his chair. "She watched as my daughter was stolen, as my pack was shamed. I will use whatever means necessary to restore my honor, to restore this family." "This isn't about family," I cried, jumping to my feet. "This is about your pride. You would murder your own daughter to undo a choice your other daughter made to save us all." The words were out before I could stop them. His face went pale, then flushed with a dark, dangerous red. "What did you say?" he growled, rising slowly to his full, intimidating height. "She did it to save us," I repeated, the full, desperate truth pouring out of me. "There was no war to be won. You were leading them to their deaths, and she knew it. She sacrificed herself, her name, everything to stop you, and you are so blinded by your own arrogance you can't even see it." He stared at me, his mouth agape, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes quickly swallowed by renewed fury. "He has gotten to you," he whispered, his voice laced with venom. "The Black Fang poison has seeped into you as well. You defend her. You defend him." He took a step toward me, his hand raised. For a moment I thought he would strike me, but instead his hand dropped. A look of cold, terrible clarity came over his face. "I see now," he said, his voice flat and dead. "The taint is deeper than I thought. You are no longer my daughter. You are a mouthpiece for my enemy." He turned away from me, his shoulders slumped not in defeat, but in grim resolution. "Kyle," he called out. The beta entered the tent immediately, his eyes on his alpha. "Take her to the stone circle," my father commanded, his voice devoid of all emotion. "Confine her there. The ritual will proceed at moonrise tomorrow. She has made her choice. She will serve her purpose to this pack one way or another." Kyle grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. I didn't struggle. I didn't scream. A strange, chilling calm washed over me. My father had just confirmed my fate. He had just made my decision for me. I would not be a sacrifice for his pride. I would not let my life be the price for a magic that would likely destroy my sister's soul. As Kyle dragged me from the tent, through the hostile stares of my former packmates, my gaze lifted to the northern ridge. The standing stones were just visible against the star-dusted sky. Moonrise. Norik would be waiting. And for the first time, the thought of the enemy Alpha's shadow felt less like a threat, and more like my only hope. The stone circle was a place of endings. Ancient moss-covered monoliths leaned against the sky like the broken teeth of a long-dead god. It was here that condemned traitors met their fate, their blood spilled to appease the old spirits of the mountain. My father had not just sentenced me to death. He had sentenced me to a profane one, chaining me in a place of judgment to await a ritual of dark magic. The irony was a bitter acid in my throat. I, who had been judged for a lack of loyalty, was now to be the unwilling sacrifice to save the sister they all called traitor. 2 guards, stoic and grim-faced, had bound my wrists with thick leather cords to one of the central stones. They left me with a skin of water and a hunk of dry bread, a final meal I had no intention of eating. The moon, a sliver short of full, cast long, distorted shadows that danced like specters around me. The wind whispered through the stones, carrying the scent of my own fear and the distant, tantalizing aroma of the free forest. My wolf, which had been a storm of conflict, was now a single, focused point of feral resolve. It cared nothing for pack politics or a father's wounded pride. It cared only for survival. It paced the edges of my consciousness, testing the strength of my human shell, yearning for the moment to break free, but I held it back. A premature shift would be useless. I would be a wolf in chains, easily dispatched. I needed a plan. I needed an opportunity. Hours crawled by. The cold of the stones seeped into my back, a deep, numbing chill that felt like death itself creeping into my veins. I watched the moon on its slow, inexorable journey across the sky, my heart marking its progress like a frantic metronome. Moonrise. Norris's deadline. It was no longer an offer to consider. It was my only chance. But the standing stones were on the wrong ridge, miles from our meeting point, and I was bound and guarded. Despair began to gnaw at the edges of my resolve. Suddenly, a scent cut through the night, sharp and unfamiliar. Not the pine and earth of the Silverwood territory, but something else. Smoke, but not from a campfire. It was the acrid chemical smell of alchemist's fire, and it was close. A low growl rumbled from the chest of one of my guards. He and his partner exchanged a nervous glance, their hands tightening on the hilts of their axes. Then came the sound, a low, mournful howl, but it was not the call of a wolf. It was a hunting horn, its note alien and chilling. A sound we had not heard in these woods for a generation. Hunters. Not rival shifters, but humans. Fanatics who called themselves the purified blade, who believed all shifters were abominations to be eradicated. They were ruthless, well-armed, and used silver and fire to nullify our advantages of speed and strength. A wave of shouts erupted from the main camp below. The sounds of battle, the clash of steel, the roar of shifting wolves, the screams of the wounded, rose into the night. My guards were torn, their heads snapping between me, their prisoner, and the sounds of their pack fighting for its life. "The camp is under attack," one of them yelled, his eyes wide with a mixture of fury and fear. "Our orders are to stay here," the other snarled back, though his body was thrumming with the need to join the fight. An arrow tipped with a sickly green glowing substance hissed out of the darkness and slammed into the chest of the second guard. He gasped, a look of shocked betrayal on his face, before clawing at the bolt. His skin began to smoke and blacken where the arrow had touched him. Wolfsbane poison, concentrated and deadly. He collapsed, convulsing, a choked gurgle his final sound. The first guard let out a roar of rage and charged into the darkness from which the arrow had come. I heard the sharp ring of his axe meeting a sword, a guttural snarl, and then a sickening, wet crunch followed by silence. I was alone. The sounds of the battle raged below, a chaotic symphony of death, but up here, in the circle of stones, an eerie quiet had fallen. My heart hammered against my ribs. The hunters were here. They had flanked the main camp, and I was directly in their path. The leather cords on my wrists felt impossibly tight. I pulled, twisting my hands until the skin was raw and bleeding, but the knots held fast. My wolf raged inside me, desperate to shift, to fight, to run, but trapped in this human form. I was helpless. Footsteps crunched on the gravel behind me, slow, deliberate, heavy. Not the light tread of a shifter. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for a silver blade in my back. "I believe this is what you call an unfortunate complication," The voice was not the harsh rasp of a human hunter. It was the deep, rumbling baritone I had heard only once before, a voice that sounded like shifting continents. My eyes flew open. Norik Talvarin stood before me, not as an apparition in the shadows, but solid and real in the pale moonlight. He was armed now, a massive, unadorned claymore strapped to his back, but his hands were empty. He was alone. "You," I breathed, a mixture of terror and overwhelming relief washing over me. "What are you doing here? Your meeting place was a deliberate misdirection," he finished, his stormy eyes scanning our surroundings, missing nothing. "I did not expect human hunters, but I did expect your father would not simply let you walk away. I have been watching this place for the last hour." He moved to my side, his presence a wall of warmth and power that pushed back the night's chill. With a single fluid motion, he drew a small, wicked-looking knife from his boot. He didn't cut my bonds. Instead, he held the blade to my throat. I flinched, my breath catching, the cold steel a terrifying kiss against my skin. "5 hunters," he murmured, his voice low and close to my ear, his breath stirring my hair. "Fanned out, moving this way. They will be on us in a moment." He did not seem afraid. He seemed invigorated. "They think you are a sacrifice. I will let them continue to think so. Do not fight me. Do not speak. Follow my lead." His plan, insane as it was, dawned on me. He wasn't just rescuing me. He was using this attack as a cover, shaping the chaos to his own ends. Before I could process it further, the hunters emerged from the trees. They moved in a practiced formation, their steel armor glinting, their faces grim behind iron visors. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with a fanatical gleam in his eyes, held a crossbow leveled at Norik's chest. "Well, well," the hunter captain sneered. "Looks like we've interrupted a pagan ritual. Step away from the girl, beast. We are here to cleanse this mountain of your kind." Norik laughed, a low, dangerous sound that held no humor. "This one," he said, pressing the knife just hard enough to draw a single warm drop of blood from my neck. I gasped, playing my part. "She is a sacrifice, yes, but to my pack, not yours. A blood offering to fuel our victory tonight. You have merely saved me the trouble of slitting her throat myself." He shoved me forward, making me stumble. "Go on, take her. She is tainted blood, a traitor's sister, worthless to me now that you've arrived." The hunters hesitated, confused. This was not the scenario they had expected. They had anticipated finding a cowering victim, not an alpha seemingly willing to give her up. The captain narrowed his eyes, suspicious. "And you," he demanded, "you will just let us walk away?" "I will give you a choice," Norik said, his voice dropping to a predatory growl. He let the knife in his hand disappear back into its sheath and drew the massive claymore from his back. The sound of the steel clearing the scabbard was like a death knell. The blade was longer than my arm, a brutal slab of dark metal that seemed to drink the moonlight. "You can take the girl and run from my mountain, or you can stay and be cleansed from this world by my hand." His aura exploded outwards. It was no longer the calm, contained power I had felt before. This was the full, unrestrained might of a prime alpha, a force of nature that made the very air crackle. His eyes began to glow with a soft, internal silver light. A low growl started in his chest, a sound that vibrated through the stone beneath my feet. This was the alpha they whispered about in fear. The destroyer, the Black Fang. The hunters, for all their fanaticism, were not fools. They could feel the impossible power rolling off him. They had come to hunt wolves, not a demigod. Their bravado evaporated, replaced by a primal fear. The captain swallowed hard, his crossbow wavering. "Take her," he choked out to his men, his eyes never leaving Norik. "We're leaving." 2 of the hunters grabbed my arms, their grips bruising, and began to drag me away from the circle. I let myself be pulled, my heart pounding. Was this Norik's plan? To let them take me? We had gone no more than 20 paces when Norik spoke again, his voice a deceptively calm whisper that carried on the wind. "I did say you could take her and run." He took a single thunderous step forward. "I never said you would get very far." He moved. It wasn't a run, it was an eruption of speed and violence, a blur of shadow and steel. Before the hunters could even turn, he was upon them. The claymore swung in a devastating arc, a whisper of wind followed by a sound like a cleaver splitting bone. The two hunters holding me collapsed without a sound, their bodies nearly sheared in half. I was thrown to the ground, spattered with their hot blood. The remaining 3 hunters stared in frozen horror. The captain fired his crossbow, but Norik was no longer there, swatting the bolt out of the air with his gauntleted hand, as if it were a bothersome fly. He moved through them like a reaper through wheat. It wasn't a fight. It was a slaughter. He was a storm of fluid, brutal motion, his massive blade a seamless extension of his will. In less than 10 seconds, it was over. 5 heavily armed hunters lay dead or dying on the ground. Norik stood in the center of the carnage, his chest rising and falling slowly. The silver glow in his eyes faded. He turned to me, his face an unreadable mask, the great sword in his hand dripping crimson onto the thirsty earth. He walked over and stood above me, a terrifying, blood-soaked silhouette against the moon. He offered me his free hand. It was steady, warm, and clean. I stared at it for a moment, my mind struggling to reconcile the gentle diplomat from the woods with the inhumanly efficient killer who stood before me. They were 2 sides of the same terrible, magnificent coin. With a trembling hand, I took his. He pulled me to my feet, as if I weighed nothing. "The battle in your camp is a diversion," he said, his voice once again calm and controlled. "My betas are leading the attack. It will keep your father occupied." He gestured with his head toward the dark northern ridge. "Come, my pack is waiting, and so is your sister." The journey through the Bloodwood Valley was a silent flight through a world of shadows. Norik moved with a speed and certainty that defied the treacherous terrain, his large frame gliding through the dense undergrowth as if it were parting for him. I followed in his wake, my body aching and bruised, my senses on high alert. The sounds of battle from the Silverwood camp faded behind us, replaced by the hushing of the wind and the frantic, unsteady rhythm of my own heart. He had not just saved me from my father's pyre. He had slaughtered 5 men in the space of a few heartbeats and spoken of his own betas attacking my pack, as if discussing the weather. I was running with the wolf, but I had no illusions about the fact that I was still prey. We climbed the northern ridge, the one he had named in his false invitation. As we crested the top, the trees gave way to a wide, sheltered clearing. Torches burned in iron sconces, casting a flickering golden light over a small temporary encampment. The scent of roasting meat, pine smoke, and wet fur filled the air, the scent of a pack at rest. Black Fang warriors looked up as we entered, their faces hard and wary. They were larger than the Silverwood wolves, their builds heavier, their eyes holding a feral intensity that was both unsettling and impressive. They watched me, their new alpha's strange companion, with open suspicion, low growls rumbling in their chests. Norik paid them no mind. He strode through the center of the camp, a king returning to his court, and they parted before him, their growls dying in their throats as they lowered their heads in deference. He led me toward the largest of the hide tents, set slightly apart from the others. He stopped before the entrance, turning to face me. The torchlight played over the sharp planes of his face, illuminating the stark lines of his scars. "She is inside," he said, his voice softer than I had yet heard it. "She has been anxious." My breath hitched. Cassandra. After all this time, all the pain and confusion, she was just on the other side of that hide flap. I looked from the tent to Norik, a question in my eyes. He seemed to understand it. "This is your conversation," he said, taking a step back. "I will not be a part of it." He turned and walked away, leaving me alone before the entrance, his presence lingering in the air like the echo of a storm. My hand trembled as I reached for the flap. Pushing it aside, I stepped into the warm, candlelit interior. The tent was spacious, lined with thick furs and simple, functional furniture. And standing by a small wooden table, her back to me, was a slender figure with hair the color of spun moonlight. She was tracing the patterns on a clay cup, her shoulders tense. "Cassandra?" I whispered. She froze. Slowly she turned around. It was her, but it wasn't. She was thinner than I remembered. The soft, youthful roundness of her face replaced by a new, sharp-edged maturity. There were shadows under her eyes that had never been there before. But the eyes themselves, they were no longer the empty, frozen pools I had seen across the battlefield. They were wide, luminous, and shimmering with unshed tears. "Pallyra," she breathed, and her voice was a fragile, broken thing. In an instant, the chasm between us, the battlefield, the mark, the betrayals real and imagined, vanished. I stumbled forward, and she met me halfway, her arms wrapping around me in a desperate, clinging embrace. I buried my face in her hair, which still smelled faintly of lavender, and a sob I hadn't realized I was holding back tore itself from my chest. She was real, she was warm, she was my sister. We held each other for a long time, a silent reunion that said more than words ever could. She was trembling, and I could feel the frantic beat of her heart against my own. When we finally drew apart, she kept my hands in hers, her grip tight, as if she was afraid I might disappear. "I was so scared," she whispered, her eyes searching my face. "When Norik said he was going for you, when my father, oh Pallyra, what did he do to you?" Her gaze fell to my wrists, raw and bleeding from the leather bonds. A look of profound pain crossed her face. "This is my fault. All of it." "No," I said, my voice thick. "It's not. He told me, Cassandra. Norik told me everything. Why you did it." Tears finally spilled from her eyes, tracking clean paths through the dust on her cheeks. "I didn't know what else to do," she confessed, her voice cracking. "I heard Father talking with the betas. He was so certain of victory. But the scouts' reports, they were lying to him, telling him what he wanted to hear. We were outnumbered, outmatched. To attack was suicide. You would have died. Everyone would have died. For what? A strip of land and his pride?" She pulled me toward a pile of furs, and we sat, still clutching each other's hands. "I slipped away," she continued, her gaze distant, lost in the memory. "I went to their border. I was going to beg Norik for mercy, for his pack to simply leave us be. I thought he would kill me or take me prisoner." "But he didn't," I prompted gently. She shook her head, a small, wondering smile touching her lips. "He listened. He stood there, this huge, terrifying man the legends call a monster, and he just listened. He told me he didn't want war either, that it was a waste of good wolves. He was the one who proposed the bond, an alliance, a way to stop the bloodshed for good." A faint blush colored her cheeks. "He said it was the only treaty a man like my father would be forced to respect." "And you agreed?" I asked, still trying to wrap my mind around it. "Just like that? To be bound to him?" Her gaze met mine, and there was a new strength in it, a deep, unwavering certainty. "It wasn't a sacrifice, Pallyra. Not really. When he looked at me, my wolf, it saw him, it recognized him. It felt calm, safe, like coming home after a long storm." She touched the mark on her neck, her fingers tracing the dark, swirling lines. It was no longer the angry, malevolent brand I had seen on the battlefield. Now, in the soft light, it looked more like a piece of intricate art, perfectly suited to the curve of her neck. The bond wasn't forced. It settled. It was right. The fated mate. The bond of destiny that poets and elders spoke of, so rare it was considered a myth by most. My sister, the quiet, gentle Cassandra, had found her myth in the heart of our greatest enemy. It explained everything. The calm certainty, the willingness to endure our family's hatred. It wasn't just a political alliance. It was the deepest law of our kind. "I tried to tell you," she whispered, her voice full of regret. "That night on the field, I tried to show you I wasn't afraid, that I wasn't a prisoner, but there was no time, no way to explain. All you could see was a traitor. All I could see was my sister standing with a monster, I corrected softly. And I was afraid for you? I know. She squeezed my hand. And I'm sorry, I'm so sorry for the pain it caused you, for what Father did to you. When Norik's scouts told us you'd been taken to the stone circle, I thought my heart would stop. We fell silent for a moment, the candles sputtering, the weight of all that had happened settling between us. She had made an impossible choice, and I had nearly paid the price for our father's inability to accept it. What happens now? I asked. Father won't stop. He'll see this as a kidnapping. He'll attack with everything he has. Norik knows, she said. His betas will pull back before any real damage is done. The hunter attack has weakened the Silverwood pack. Father will be forced to regroup. It will buy us time. Time for what? Time for the Silverwood pack to see the truth, a deep voice said from the tent's entrance. We both looked up. Norik stood there, having discarded his blood-soaked sword and armor. He was in a simple dark tunic, his presence filling the space. His stormy eyes were fixed on Cassandra, and in their depths was a look of such profound tenderness and fierce protectiveness that it stole my breath. This was not the calculating diplomat or the brutal warrior. This was the mate. He came and sat on the other side of Cassandra, his large hand gently covering both of ours. The heat and strength in his touch was startling. Your father rules through pride and fear, he said to me, his gaze now turning to mine. But a pack cannot survive on that forever. They are losing faith. They saw him ready to sacrifice his own daughter on a pyre of dark magic. They saw his camp breached by human hunters. His strength is failing. His honor is a cracked shield. Soon they will start looking for a new leader, one who offers true strength, stability, peace. He was not just offering me sanctuary. He was offering me a role in a revolution. He was planning to break my father's rule, not with an invasion of armies, but with an invasion of truth. You want me to help you? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. To turn my own pack against my father? I want you to help your pack save itself, he corrected. Your father is leading it to ruin. You have seen it. You have felt it on your own skin. He looked down at our joined hands. Your loyalty to your kin is your greatest strength. I am not asking you to betray your pack. I am asking you to redefine what it means to save them. He finally released our hands and rose to his feet. Cassandra needs rest. You both do. You are safe here, Palira. No one will harm you. He looked at Cassandra, and a silent conversation passed between them in a single glance. He nodded slightly and then turned and left the tent, leaving the three of us in the warm, quiet candlelight. I looked at my sister, at the undeniable strength and peace in her face as she watched her mate leave. I looked at the dark mark on her neck, no longer a symbol of betrayal, but of a bond deeper than blood. And I looked at my own raw wrists, the physical proof of my father's love turning to poison. He had been willing to kill me to preserve his pride. Norik had risked his own life, walking into enemy territory to honor my sister's wish to see me safe. The lines were no longer blurred. They were stark and clear. One alpha offered death and honor. The other offered a difficult truth and a chance at life. My wolf, for the first time in a long time, felt settled. It was no longer torn. It had found a new, undeniable center of gravity. I had been raised to believe loyalty was everything. And in that moment, I realized my loyalty was not to an alpha, or name, or territory. It was to my blood, to my sister, and to the future of the pack she had sacrificed everything to protect. My war was no longer on a single front. It would be fought in the heart of my old pack, with whispers and truth as my only weapons. The air of the new spring was cool and clean, carrying the scent of thawing earth and the sweet perfume of pine sap. 3 moons had waxed and waned since the night I had been saved from the stone circle, and in their passing the world had been remade. I stood on the central ridge of the Bloodwood Valley, the very place where our two packs had once faced each other with blades drawn. Now the snow had retreated to the highest peaks, and the valley floor was a tapestry of new green shoots pushing through the winter-browned grass. It was no longer a no-man's land. It was the heart of our new territory. Below me, a joint hunting party moved through the woods. The lithe gray-furred wolves of Silverwood fanned out, their movement swift and silent as they drove a herd of deer toward the ambush point. And there, hidden amongst the granite outcroppings, the larger, darker forms of the Black Fang warriors waited, their powerful muscles coiled in anticipation, speed and strength working in perfect, deadly harmony. A low howl, the signal to close the trap, rose on the air, a sound of seamless cooperation that would have been unthinkable a season ago. My father's reign had not ended in a great bloody battle as he would have wished. It had crumbled from within, collapsing under the weight of its own lies. When North's betas had withdrawn after the hunter attack, they had left behind not just a weakened and rattled Silverwood pack, but a single, undeniable truth for them to find: the bodies of the purified blade hunters at the stone circle, and the severed leather bonds still tied to the sacrificial stone. The evidence was irrefutable. While his pack fought for their lives, Alpha Corvin had been preparing to murder his own daughter in a forbidden ritual. The whispers of my father's tainted bloodline, which had once been directed at Gisandra and me, now turned on him. His narrative of the betrayed father fell apart. His warriors, who had followed him out of honor, now saw that his honor was a hollow thing, a fragile vessel for his pride. They saw a leader who had been so obsessed with an imagined insult that he had left his pack vulnerable to a real enemy. They saw a wolf who had been willing to break the most sacred laws for his own selfish ends. The challenge came not from Norik, but from Kael, my father's own beta. He had stood before the assembled pack, the severed, blood-stained bonds in his hand, and he had not drawn a blade. He had simply asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Who do you serve, a pack or a single man's pride? My father had roared, had demanded loyalty, had tried to rally them with tales of Black Fang treachery. But they had only seen the truth of his desperation. When he moved to strike Kael down, 3 other senior warriors had stepped between them, not to fight him, but to simply stand in his way. That was all it took. An alpha's power comes from the will of his pack, and their will had turned. Defeated not by claws and teeth, but by a wall of silent, immovable judgment, he had been exiled. Stripped of his title and his name, he had walked alone into the wilderness, a ghost haunted by the kingdom he had broken. I wore a mantle of gray wolf fur over my dark Black Fang leathers now, a symbol of my new role. I was no longer just Palira Thalis, the traitor's sister. I was the bridge. As the sister of the new Luna and the daughter of the last Silverwood Alpha, I was the voice for those who still felt lost, who were struggling to accept the new order. I trained the young wolves, teaching them to blend the two fighting styles. I sat on Norik's council, ensuring the old Silverwood laws and traditions were not forgotten, but woven into the new fabric of the united pack. A warm, familiar presence came to stand beside me on the ridge. Gisandra. She was glowing, her face filled with a serene confidence that I had never seen in her before. Motherhood was suiting her. The slight swell of her belly beneath her tunic was a promise of the pack's future, a new bloodline born of peace, not war. The hunt was good, she said, her voice soft but sure. They will eat well tonight. They work well together, I agreed, watching as the hunters emerged from the woods, hauling their successful kills. There was easy camaraderie among them now. The sharing of a wineskin, a gruff clap on the shoulder between a former Black Fang and a former Silverwood. It is because of you, Gisandra said, touching my arm. They trust you. You showed them that loyalty isn't about which side of a valley you were born on. I smiled, a genuine, easy expression that no longer felt foreign on my face. I learned from the best. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching our two peoples become one. Later, at the communal fire, Norik would join us. He would come and stand behind Gisandra, his hand resting possessively on the curve of her stomach, his stormy eyes scanning his pack with a fierce, unwavering vigilance. He was still a terrifying force of nature, an alpha of immense power, but I no longer saw a monster. I saw a king who had been willing to build a bridge instead of burning a country, a mate whose tenderness for my sister was the quiet, steady center of his world. He had given me a choice that night in the woods, and in doing so had given me back my family, my purpose, and my honor. The sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of violet and rose. The first star appeared, and above it, the full moon began to rise, a perfect luminous pearl against the deepening twilight. She was no longer a distant, judgmental goddess, a witness to my shame. She was our mother, the keeper of our cycles, the silent guardian who shone down on all of us, no matter our name or our fur. The battlefield was now a meadow, the silence was now a promise of peace, and the two packs who had prepared to tear each other apart now lived as one. Under the watchful silver eye of a single shared moon, we were finally whole.